Thank you, kids, for listening to this. And Dan, I have given you my greatest congratulations, love, and pride, and amazement that someone's grandson is willing to let their grandmother tell the story of her life. Of course, I'm sitting here feeling that I know you all, whoever is listening, or maybe everyone is, are dying to hear me tell about my life. And my memory fails me a little as to what I've documented through Dan previously, but I do want to alert you to the fact that the recent course that Zilla took at Penn in writing has proven to be very interesting. She got a wonderful grade on it, and you'd be proud if you could read her stories. But one story, I didn't realize this was the way it would turn out. One story was an interview with her mother, and she's typed up something like 5 single-spaced pages of her interview with me. And I'm not going to repeat any of that, although I might have repeated a couple of instances previously. But you really should read this, because it gives the impression of a young, growing female in a situation, social situation of the 20s and 30s and the beginning of the 40s. And the way we lived, I'm not saying we're the only people that lived like this, but the way we lived was certainly structured, disciplined, almost forbidding, but I didn't come out of it with any feeling that I had been warped or missed out on anything at all. I loved my mother and father, I loved my grandmothers, and we lived a free and easy world, if I can, except for doing exactly what Grandma wanted us to do, because it was her house. But I remember things that Grandma would say and do, and they may be on the other thing, but I wanted to talk about my early life with your father. And I don't know whether I've included the story of I had this miserable teenage experience of going through these debutante, educational dances where we had to go, and some of that is written up in those pages. But my mother and father wouldn't let me stop going to these, even though I was the wallflower of the whole place, and it was terrible. You went in, I'll just repeat, you went in all dressed up, all the girls, and you went to a forbidding line of elegant mothers who were very snobbish, and you shook hands with them, and then they passed you through, and then you went over to the gym, to the side of the gym where there were nothing but schoolroom chairs, and you sat down in your evening dress, and a wonderful orchestra called Ruby Newman would start up, and you would wait for the boys to come and choose you, and they would come one by one, until I was the last girl on the row, and 40 others were dancing. And it was just unbearable. And I would slip out at that point and go to the ladies' room. And then, and when it came 12 o'clock, usually when we were 16 or 17, we weren't allowed to drive home with boys. The boys, mind you, were all Harvard upperclassmen. And you can imagine what was on their minds. So they were trying to get off in their car and take a girl home or someplace. But my father wouldn't let me do that. So that as the evening ended, he would appear in the doorway, the little lobby at the doorway, in full evening tuxedo, not tails, and Stan would wait for me to go home with him, and I would go home. But I struggled through this, and I struggled into senior year at Radcliffe, which I will call Radcliffe, it's now Harvard. And I struggled through senior year at the Windsor School, and I wasn't allowed to go to parties at Harvard College. But since I was about to graduate, I was allowed to go to a party in the corner of Lowell House, which is beside the Lars Anderson Bridge and Memorial Drive, and that's a little south of the post office at Harvard. And I think there's a John F. Kennedy something that was on the same street. It wasn't there when we were there. Now, I was allowed to go to this party, and it was going to be musical. A friend of one of the two other girls who were going, my best friends, and some very interesting musicians who've gone ahead and been very successful classical music. And so I went in, and I was sitting talking to a French harpsichord builder. And all of a sudden I looked up, and Alan and Ed Peterson, his roommate, were climbing through the window. And they'd been right across the street at the Well Boathouse, rowing in a crew race. Now, Alan's two athletic points were doing crew race for Kirkland House, and being on the swimming team with John F. Kennedy, and I think I've told you all about that. But we had no personal friend with John F. Kennedy, but Ed Peterson became a doctor in Denver, and Robin knows who he was. But they were roommates, so they climbed in, and apparently they said, well, we have to have a shower. So they went out to their dorm and got all cleaned up. Well, I recognized Alan because I had gone with my best friend, Dottie Whiteman, had gone to the Philadelphia Orchestra, gone to the Boston Symphony, and sat in the front row of the first balcony, and I was right over the Harvard Glee Club. And I'm sitting there listening to the Bach Mass, and I saw Alan, and I thought, oh my goodness, isn't he divine looking? And he was singing second bass in the Bach Mass in the Harvard Glee Club. So I nudged Dottie, and I said, see that? Oh, I don't know, she said. Well, the Mass was long, and we were going out to get pizza or something in the intermission. And so I said we went out to the lobby, and the Symphony Hall, of course, was two wedges, and there was a main aisle here and a main aisle here. And I knew the Harvard men were coming out into the hall and going to a restaurant. And so I got my eye on Ed and Alan, and I could see they weren't going to go out. They were too poor to eat out, to tell you the truth. But they had lunches packed for them, which was a courtesy from their dorm. So they went in from the lobby and took the two seats in the front row of the upper section and sat down in their tuxedos and started opening their picnic lunches. And so I looked at this, and I have never done this in my life, but I never saw a man I wanted to pick up before or since. But anyway, I walked past him, and I looked at him, and he looked right up. He said he never saw me. And because it was a little awkward, I walked all the way across the hall, turned around, and walked all the way back to meet Dottie, who was out in the main lobby. And we didn't talk about it at all. But I remember I had a pink diary, and I wrote in the diary, April 19, 1940, that I had seen this marvelous Mass at the Bach Mass in the Harvard Glee Club. So time passed, and then when the year ended, and it was Memorial Day, I got a chance to go to this cocktail party, and I could because I was about to be graduated from high school. So I was in there talking to Claude Chasson, the harpsichord builder, And all of a sudden, the two boys who had came through in wet clothes came back, all dressed up, and I realized right away that was the one I'd seen in the Tea Club. So Dottie was kind of across the room. They had gorgeous rooms in the silent homes. And I rushed over and I said, Dottie, Dottie, there he is. What? Oh, don't be silly. Yes, that's the one. Oh, I don't care. And so I went back and sat down. And so the story goes that Alan took a look at me and he came right over and we started talking. And then it came time when the boys were inviting all the girls to dinner at Lowell House. And right away Alan said, oh, don't eat there with everybody. Come and eat with me at Kirkland House. You know, there's a whole series of different dorms and kitchen and one dining room. And so I said, sure. So I didn't join the party. We walked back up. And we went over to Kirkland, up and over to Kirkland House. And after that, he said, well, let's go to the movies in Harvard Square, the university movie, which I had been raised in. And so I said, sure, but you know what movie it was? It was Pinocchio. And so we went to Pinocchio, because I loved it. I had never asked him if he liked it. And so then he walked me home. It was 6/10 of a mile. He didn't have a car. So he walked me home. And we got up to the front door, and I had a key. But my father had double bolted it, because I was supposed to come in by midnight. And by that time it was like 10 minutes past midnight. So I had to ring the bell. So the next thing I knew, Grampy was standing beside us. He was dressed, but not in a tuxedo. And he had a shoulder holster on and a hip holster on, and maybe bed slippers. And he said, why are you late? I said, well, we walked home from the movies. So he let him in, and I don't know whether we had a glass of orange juice or something, but then he walked back. And somehow I managed, that was Saturday, I managed to tell him that every Sunday morning I went to Sunday school and I conducted the junior choir. And we didn't go to service because it was pretty much at the same time. When I was very little, we would walk in after Sunday school in the Unitarian Church in Harvard Square and sit in my family pew. But when I was conducting the chorus, I couldn't do that. And so I'm conducting only hymns. It was just little kids. And I looked up at the door, which was one of these doors with a half window. And there he was, looking in the window. I thought, oh my heavens. And so when it was over, he waited in the anteroom till it was over. And then he said, I came up here on my bike, but it's just been stolen. Could I walk you home? And I said, sure, come home for lunch. And we're going to Marblehead Neck to clean up. It wasn't really ready to live in. And I said, you can ride down with us. So we rode down with Dad, and we cleaned and dusted, and Alan shined brass candlesticks. And then we went home, and that was fine. Well, it turned out by that time it was after Memorial Day, and he was taking final exams, and then he was going to graduate, and I was going to graduate from Windsor School. And so things got awfully shoveled up. I didn't have any boyfriends, and I didn't have, my girlfriends weren't having any parties. But anyway, I didn't, for some reason, you know, you had an extra ticket to your commencement, and my great aunt wanted to come. And so I had a ticket for Mother and Daddy and Aunt Laura. And I guess maybe I didn't have one for Helen. Or maybe I didn't think he'd care, but I never asked him in my graduation. And so then we had a very few days. And he had to leave to Muskegon because he had to work all summer. He had college debts or whatever. And he hadn't done anything about a job for the next fall. And so he went to Harvard, and they set him up with a master at the Salisbury School in Salisbury, Connecticut. And he was to teach physics and chemistry. He wasn't good at chemistry, nobody is. And coach crew and swimming and lived there all the time. Well, the Salisbury School is in northwestern Massachusetts, so that wasn't a bad drive. And so when I had my debutante party, I was going right into the Eastman School of Music as a freshman. And so we corresponded. And then when I was going home at Christmas, he took me off the train in Pittsfield. And I saw him, and he was fired, but he got through the end. And then he drove me home. And he was there for my debutante party in the old house, the big old house, and stood on the same rug that's in the living room, that pink one. And so that was debutante, and I had to go back to Eastman, and he had to go back to Salisbury School. And at the end of Salisbury School, he had gotten the job to go to Hawaii. And so I guess I met him when we said goodbye. And he traveled to Los Angeles and got on a tour on a boat and went all by himself, of course, over to Hawaii. Mom Conger had a sorority friend who was the principal of, no, not Punahou, that's the famous one, younger children's private school, Hanawahauoli, and they still be running. And she and Mom were great friends, so she contacted Louisa Palmer, and Louisa Palmer looked after Alan, but of course he lived independently. And so he started working with the biology department. He's going to get a master's degree and then come back to Harvard for the PhD. And so they were going off around Hawaii and collecting plants and going home, dissecting the plants and looking for the chromosomes. And this was going on, of course he never got to come back. This was going on until December 7th. And then he continually, we've just gotten to Pearl Harbor, so we'll break off now, and then we'll start at Pearl Harbor. And my children will know this story.